Let me start with what apparently the president said behind closed doors to the House Democrats. And he floated the idea that, hey, this number is going to be a little bit lower, 1.9 trillion to 2.2 trillion. Have you accepted the fact that it's not going to be 3.5 trillion?
Chuck, that is, by the way, that is not my understanding of what he said. What he said is there's going to have to be give and take on both sides. I'm not clear that he did bring forth a specific number. But what the president also said, and what all of us are saying, is that maybe the time is now for us to stand up to powerful special interests who are currently spending hundreds of millions of dollars trying to prevent us from doing what the American people want. We want to lower substantially prescription drug costs in this country so we're not paying 10 times more for certain drugs than Canada and other countries. And the pharmaceutical industry has 1,400 lobbyists on Capitol Hill right now trying to stop us. We want to deal with the existential threat of climate change. We want to deal with child care. We want to expand Medicare so elderly people can chew their food, can have hearing aids, can have eyeglasses, and we can pay for this by demanding that the wealthiest people and largest corporations finally start paying their fair share of taxes. That's what this struggle is about. Do we do what the American people want? Do we fulfill what democracy is supposed to be about, or do we bow down to powerful special interests?
What is your preference when you're writing this bill? Look, I know what your initial preference was. You believe 3.5 trillion is the compromise, that you started at 6 trillion. But whatever the number ends up being agreed upon, do you believe in these programs? Because there's a large wish list and a set of needs the country has, but you might not be able to do all of them fully funded. Do you believe in trying to do as many of them as you can, and maybe that some of them are smaller programs and you'll vote on them in a couple years to extend the funding? Or do you think you got to do 3 or 4 things really well?
Chuck, this is not a wish list. Climate change and cutting carbon emissions has everything to do with whether or not we leave this planet to future generations that is healthy and is habitable. Scientists tell us we got a few years. You want more workers out in the workforce. We need to reform childcare so that 1 million women can come back to work and not have to pay as a family 20 or 30% of their income for childcare. You have to have skilled workforce. We can't have a skilled workforce and do the good jobs that are out there unless we train young people. That's why we want to make community colleges tuition free. So this is not a wish list. This is what the working families of this country want and what the economy needs. The real question is, the Republicans, of course, are owned by the pharmaceutical industry and the fossil fuel industry. We don't expect them to do anything. But the question now is whether the Democrats can come together, and I think that we can, to finally do what working families in this country desperately want us to do.
You know, I'm curious, one of the things that we've observed here in our news division is we know we're going to be closer to a deal when we see you and Senator Manchin in the same room with the president. And I'm curious, Senator Schumer apparently had a memo that had the number that Senator Manchin was basically his beginning negotiating number. Was that news to you, or have you known this for a couple of months, where Senator Manchin stood on his red lines?
Well, Senator Manchin has, in fact, been public about talking. I think his number was $1.5 trillion. That's fine. That's a good negotiating start. Manchin has also said that he wants it paid for. I want it paid for. And you can pay for it with a $3.5 trillion bill by finally demanding that the wealthiest people in large corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. As you well know, Chuck, there's a given year when Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, the wealthiest people in this country, don't pay a nickel in federal income taxes. Large corporations don't pay a nickel. We address that. You could pay for a $3.5 trillion. You could pay for a $6 trillion bill and pay for it completely.